Hello! Today I'm in Chiang Mai and it's the first batch of the spring season, so I'm very happy today because it's the first time of the year that we've warmed up the wok. It's been heating up for about 2 hours now. It took me some time to really make sure it's clean. There was a bit of rust at the bottom of the wok, so I cleaned everything. It's very well heated up now, and yeah, so we're gonna go for a hot start. Like, it's 330 degrees Celsius in the center of the wok, which is pretty high, and it's quite a thick wok. It means there's a lot of energy. Since the temperature is high in this thick wok, it means there's a lot of energy inside, energy that will be given to the tea leaves I have here. So that's why I will use a lower fire than usual. We're just gonna start. There's a lot of embers in the fireplace, and so we're just gonna start with a middle fire because the wok is already really hot. During this video I'll be talking about the potential effects of the coronavirus crisis on tea production and the economics of pu-erh tea. So let's get started. So I have 7.5 kilo of leaves in my wok, which is an average weight, I would say. It's the first batch, so I'm just testing the waters here. I mean, like, we don't really know whether how the tea will behave at the beginning of the season. You can hear a lot of crackling now, which means there's some water, you know, in the leaves. So let's heat the leaves up and let that water evaporate a bit. Okay, so let's start with our topic of the day, the effect of the coronavirus crisis on the tea production in Chiang Mai. So as you know, we were quarantined in Chiang Mai from mid-January to mid-February. So at that time we didn't know how long the crisis would last, but in the end the quarantine, we were released after, I think, 5 weeks. And so that was before any production had started. So we could say that the virus itself hasn't affected the production so far. On the production side, our worry would be the workforce. If movement is limited, it means that people won't be able to come to Chiang Mai to work in the fields. And you know that we need a lot of tea pickers, especially during the peak season. The peak season, which should start now. It's getting a bit late now. We're only March 20. We're already March 20th, and the tea hasn't sprouted that much yet. So I guess we'll get the peak season more likely in very late March or early April. And during that time, typically, like, our family, well, we have like 3 people from our family who pick the tea, and during the peak season we can hire as much as 10 extra workers to do our picking. So half of our workers typically come from the valley, from Hue Minh, like it's the small town in the valley, and from the mountains around. And there should be no problem at this point if there isn't a second outbreak. It shouldn't affect for those. Now the other half of the workers come from Burma, and since the crisis, we can think that there could be more controls at the border, because of course these workers usually come illegally, like they are just migrant workers. Of course the government knows about this, but they turn a blind eye because they know it helps everybody, right? It helps them to get decent money during the harvest, and it helps us because we need those workers if we want to keep doing the type of management that we're doing now. If there is a second outbreak and the movements are restricted again, then of course it will impact our tea production. I guess then we won't have time to harvest all of the gardens. Of course, people are able to put some extra time, but that extra time won't be enough to harvest everything. So I guess there will be a selection, and of course we will prioritize the higher quality material, which means the ancient tea gardens, of course, and the high altitude younger tea gardens, what we call the natural tea gardens, like the leaves I'm frying right now. We can delay the picking by a few days, but if you wait too much before you harvest the tea, all the flushes will have grown old on the tea trees, and that means that you'll get only Huang Ken. So when your garden is ready to be harvested, you usually have a window of maybe 4 or 5 days for picking the tea. And of course you need to use this window because we don't have enough, despite the extra work, we usually don't have enough workforce to pick one garden in one day. So that means you need to start early, and every day you will get different degree of maturity because every day the tea is growing a bit more. So maybe if it takes 3 days to pick one garden, you will get different degrees of maturity for this particular garden. Now, if there's a second outbreak and movements are restricted later in the season, for example, in May, then in May we need to do the weeding. As soon as the rain comes, the weed will start to grow, and we need to manage this. It's crucial, otherwise the weed will suck up all the nutrients and your tea won't grow, and if you don't do anything anyway, the weed will grow too high and will just take over the garden. It won't be possible to enter the garden actually. So if that occurs, if we don't have extra workforce at that time of the year, then well, it's possible that people will need to use herbicide if they really want to clean all the weed in their gardens, because that's the main advantage of herbicide, is that you gain a lot of time. Actually, it takes much less time to spray herbicide than to do mechanical weeding. But I'm not too worried about this because I think anyway we'll always have, the workers available. Well, that would be a worst case scenario really if we didn't have any workers at all. Typically for this second time in the season, when we need the workforce for the weeding, we need less workers than at peak season. So well, for example, if the Burmese come now, usually they will stay for quite a few months. So if there's a second outbreak later, they will just be stuck in Jingmai. They probably won't be sent back home. So we'll have those workers. And well, if they couldn't come, maybe we'll still have the workers from the valley. So on the production side, actually, I'm not too worried. It should go as usual. The worst case scenario would be that we'd have a lower harvest by eliminating the lesser quality gardens. And well, in my opinion, it's not a big loss actually. Okay, so now on the economic side. Despite the lift of the travel restrictions, we've had very few visitors because people are still a bit in that crisis mindset and they don't travel much. So despite not being able to visit, it remains to see whether they will buy or not, because we could think like, even though there's this crisis, people are still drinking tea, so there's no real reason why they wouldn't buy tea, especially the higher quality one. So again, like on the short term, for the high quality production, I'm really not worried, like especially the Gushu, it tends to sell out as soon as the tea season ends. Okay, we don't keep a lot of Gushu on hand in Jingmai. Now for the Shanghai, well, it depends on the quality compared to the average in pu-erh. well, you can say it's of superior quality. So again, it shouldn't be that big a problem, at least in the short term. Now in the long term, I mean on 1, 2, 3 years, well, we'll need to see when the crisis ends and how it ends and what the governments do to support the economies. Because, of course, this kind of price it is, you could say that's a luxury good. And we rely on wealthy people to sell this tea. Or wealthy, or I would say at least middle class. Okay, people with a disposable income. And well, a lot of this middle class in China, of course, relies on exports and production, manufacturing industry, things like that. And well, in the case there's a global economic crisis, then and there's a recession, people will have less money to buy tea. So we could ask ourselves, like, if people have less money, will they put less money in tea? Or would they put more, actually? Because, you know, there are some funny things that happen. Of course, that's a luxury good, but it's not as expensive as a car or an iPhone. And when people don't have money to buy a new car, maybe they still have enough money, you know, to buy a few cases of good tea. And that might be actually a trade-off between different industries. I was told that in France during the 2008 recession, actually all the like the gourmet food sold better than before, just because people didn't have that extra money to buy an expensive stuff like a new car. They would just fall back on some like more simple pleasures of life, just like buying nice pastries or going to nice restaurants. So I wouldn't see a huge price drop for high quality tea, really, for Gushu. I think the ones which are more at risk is like the really common Thai like plantation tea that are growing all around Yunnan, or all around southern Yunnan. Again, it's a bit tricky because it's hard to know really where this local tea goes. I still believe that a lot of people drink that kind of tea on a daily basis. So you could say, like, if you have the like the middle and low class who drink that tea, that means billions of people, and well, that's a fairly stable market. Now, I also believe that part of this tea is also used to make maybe gifts, you know, for tourists, to make all kinds of investment stuff, like cheap tea that you hope will increase in price. So purely speculative tea that is not meant to be drunk, but more meant as a stock, you know. Like when you buy tea from big factories, usually you don't even open it. I mean, like Thai or this kind of tea. It's just like buying a stock. Okay, you don't really care actually about the taste of the tea. And so, in all logic, this kind of tea would maybe follow the trends of the stock market. So if the stock market falls, it would make sense that that kind of business, of investment business in the tea, which is loosely related to drinking tea, really, it would make sense that this market will also recede, and that would affect the lower quality plantations. So I think it will all depend on the duration of that crisis and on whether or not there is a big recession. And of course, it's really hard to predict this kind of stuff at this point. But we can think that in the short term, the economy of Yunnan will suffer, because Yunnan used to be a very poor province, and it got rich mainly thanks to the tourism industry. And of course, the tourism industry is going pretty bad now. If we take the optimistic scenario where the crisis ends and ends with good confidence that it won't come back, then maybe actually we'll see a boost in tourism at the end of the year, because if people are confident there's no recession, people probably have more cash on hands now because they didn't go on vacation during the spring festival, things like that, because they were restricted. So we could think that people didn't spend a lot of money while they were under those travel restrictions. But of course that would be in the case where we're confident in the future, people are confident and are willing to spend their money on traveling and on tea, stuff like that. No, I think the tea producers who suffered the most from the crisis are probably the green tea producers, because the freshness of their product is very important, and well, the harvest kind of started at the beginning of the crisis. So, for example, in the area around pu-erh city, there's a lot of cheap plantation tea, green tea, and the pickers weren't allowed to access their gardens in some cases, depending on the geography. Some were quarantined in their village, and so at the beginning of the season the factories couldn't work. But fortunately that state only lasted for about 2 weeks, and then, like right now, the production is going as normal. It's predictable that it will be harder to sell the tea in the short term, but we don't really worry about this with pu-erh tea, especially when it's of good quality, because we can just stock it and resell it in a few months or a few years down the road. Sorry, I just ran out of battery for my camera, so the last 10 minutes of the recording are missing. I was just mainly commenting about the way I was making tea and how cool it is to make tea actually during the spring season. Well, I said, like, it's a good time at the beginning of the season because there's not too much tea to process, so you really have that time to focus, and then you get curious about the beginning of the season and what the tea will taste like, and you do find quite noticeable differences between the years. Now, of course, it also depends on what garden you harvest first and things like that. But it's always cool to have a good first impression of the season that's coming. So this is our first evening of tea production. Now this is the third batch, the last batch of the night. I hope tomorrow I'll get more leaves, because now, I'm getting warmed up and excited to continue, continue that tea processing. Something else I'd like to add about the possibility of a recession is that in the case there's a recession, there's actually a good side to it for the tea industry, and that would be maybe the research for efficiency and a stronger competition, which eventually will be good for the consumer, because maybe for a few years the consumers have hardships because they don't have much money because of the recession, but the research, the improvement that the industries undertake during these hard competition times, they will remain once the recession has passed. Now, when it comes to the impact on our own business, I'm not very worried anyway, because you can store pu-erh tea, right? So even if we don't sell it in the short term, we will eventually. Well, there are some logistical considerations, like how long will the isolation period in Europe and the US last, and how much will the post service be affected during this isolation? Well, as far as I've seen, the post service is still running. From our side in Yunnan, we have no problem sending the parcels now. All the offices are open, and the post office goes to our home every day to collect the orders. So I think it will be more a matter of consumer psychology, like do people get to make wrong associations between Chinese tea and the virus? I think now that the virus has gone global, it's less likely that that association between Chinese goods and the virus will hold, actually. This first batch of tea, I will send it to pu-erh as soon as it's dry, and I will offer it on farmer leaf. That way you'll get to try some, like, as fresh as possible pu-erh, like we've done for a couple of years now. It's a very different taste, but the cool side is that you get it young, and you can also see how it ages, especially in the first few months. That's the most interesting part, because it's a part of the aging process that's often missing in the tea drinker experience, because they can't get their hands on that kind of material. So I hope that that tea will be available for sale on our website a couple of days after we publish the video. And so tonight is a beautiful start to our new tea season, which I hope will last at least 3 weeks. I guess we can make tea at least until mid-April. So now we could say that in Yunnan, like the first coronavirus crisis is over. Now, it could come back, there could be a second outbreak, but now, it's just an afterthought in people's everyday life. Like, basically, you just have to scan something when you enter a public place like the bank, the post, a shopping mall. You just scan on your phone so that it tracks where you've been at which time, things like that. And there are places where you have to wear a face mask. But apart from this, really, people don't talk about it that much, I think. People are back to their business. So you see, in the end, that crisis lasted for about 2 months for us overall. So I'm gonna leave you here because I can see that the battery is running out again. So yeah, maybe there's a problem with that battery. Maybe it's time, after 4 years of use, that I buy a new one. So I'm gonna leave you here. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this this speculation exercise, you could say. And see you later. Bye bye.